Information and ignorance. Today we want to give these two subjects quite detailed understanding so that it helps our people to move on. I now invite my colleague who will introduce himself to start the ball rolling.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Doctor. My name is Vasal Rasman, Member of Parliament, Vujiri Municipality, and the mover of the anti-homosexuality bill, which later became an act. As the doctor has said, we want to use this platform to provide the context to what is happening in the country and the world as a result of what happened in Parliament when we enacted the anti-homosexuality law. There are about 3 or 4 aspects that I'll be highlighting. The first aspect relates to the communication by the World Bank. Now, the communication by the World Bank has 2 major issues that need to be highlighted. The first issue relates to their decision to suspend loan facilities to Uganda. And in their letter, or in their communication, they state that this law will fundamentally undermine the health rights of Ugandans. This law is discriminatory, and this law is non-inclusive. It's exclusive in nature. Now, I want to address that specifically because by making that statement, the World Bank, in effect, is expressing lack of knowledge of this law. What does the law state? And I want to invite you, colleagues of the media, to find time and address your minds to Section 14 on the duty to disclose. Section 14 of the law does not create an offense arising out of failure to disclose acts of homosexuality. There is no offense. It only places a duty on Ugandans to report acts of homosexuality to police for appropriate action. Now, what happens if you don't report? You don't commit an offense. Now, that civic duty is derived from our Constitution. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda places a duty, a civic duty, on every Ugandan to report acts of crime. Now, fortunately, that duty, omission of that duty, does not place criminal liability on anybody. Now, when you look at the statement by the World Bank, it is creating an impression that every Ugandan will have committed an offense if they don't report acts of homosexuality. That is wrong. And that's where our problem is. Either there is deliberate distortion, misinformation, or lack of ignorance, I mean total ignorance in as far as this law is concerned. Now, where does it criminalize failure to report? And we have consensus on this. Section 14 says, if you get to know acts of homosexuality and they've been committed on a child or a vulnerable person, then you commit an offense. And who is a vulnerable person? Again, the Act explains or defines who a vulnerable person is. A person that needs special care and assistance as a result of their age, sex, physical or mental incapacitation, disability, asylum seekers, refugees, internally displaced persons, and the like. Those are vulnerable people. So the law is saying where acts of homosexuality are committed on vulnerable people and you get to know about it and you don't report, you commit an offense. Now, this particular provision is actually a departure from my original proposition, because my original proposal was to make everybody responsible. But the middle ground was that no. Responsibility should be limited to failure to disclose where a person is engaged with acts of homosexuality with children or with vulnerable people. Now, when you look at the communication by the World Bank, they don't seem to appreciate that point. And I thought we would put it into context. The second aspect relates to undermining health rights or discrimination. Again, another misconception or deliberate distortion by the World Bank. In this country, where health rights are concerned, people are not asked about their sexual orientation or gender or anything. And I'll give a practical example. If a person is found on the street grabbing maybe a phone, and that person is shot at, and they are taken to Mulago or another medical facility, the doctors on site only have one duty to treat that person. They are not even supposed to ask where and how they were shot. But these are criminals. They could be criminals. You have seen criminals being arrested, shot at, taken to hospital. They are treated before they face justice. So nowhere in this country are people asked their sexual orientation before they access medical care. Nowhere. And if a medical officer did it, they would be actually undermining the Hippocratic oath. So again, the World Bank makes a very deliberate misconception as far as we are concerned, to try and create an impression that when people who are gay or perceived to be gay go to health facilities, they were going to be denied medical care on account of their sexual orientation. That does not happen. It does not happen. It has not happened anywhere in this country. And it will not happen because that in itself will be against our laws. That a medical officer, a doctor or a nurse will ask people's orientation before they are given health care, that in itself will offend our constitution. So again, the World Bank should be well advised that in this country, sexual orientation, gender, or any other orientation you want to call it, is not a prerequisite for access of medical facilities anywhere. It's not a prerequisite. The bill does not say so. I mean, this act does not say so, neither does our constitution state so. So you'd expect ordinarily that an institution like the World Bank, that is heavily facilitated with the legal personnel, health personnel, understands this basic fact. Because the bill, the act, has been structured in very simple language. So this act does not in any way undermine health rights of any Ugandan in that regard. The other aspect is the broader aspect of discrimination. Because the World Bank says this bill is discriminatory. It promotes discrimination. Let me also emphasize this, that the grounds of discrimination in this country have been established in our constitution. Somebody may not be discriminated against on the basis of age, sex, gender, tribe. Now, sexual orientation in our constitution is not one of the grounds of discrimination. In other words, our constitution has closed what we call discrimination. And you cannot import an aspect in the constitution outside what the constitution has stated. So the World Bank cannot import, because sexual orientation, and you see why I'm emphasizing this, there is a very big difference between sex and sexual orientation. In our constitution, the constitution emphasizes discrimination on the basis of sex, but not sexual orientation. And Uganda is not a signatory to any international treaty, protocol, covenant, concordant that says sexual orientation is a ground of discrimination. We are not party to any treaty in that regard. And we are not about to be parties to any treaty that says so, because in effect, it will be contradicting our constitution. Because already our constitution outlaws same-sex marriages. So I thought that must also be contextualized. Finally, on my part, on the World Bank letter, it quotes values. Now, this is the second last point. It quotes values. The letter by the World Bank says, according to World Bank's values. And I think they are right to quote their values. But where does that leave the values of Ugandans? And who told the World Bank that their values are our values? Definitely they cannot be. So if we are partners, then it means you must accommodate values of all constituent parties in the World Bank agreement. So you cannot be citing your values and leaving out the values of those who are partners in your services. So you are talking about, and by the way, World Bank's values are not universal. They are not. And we have had a debate of what we call cultural relativism. When we are trying to talk about the universality of human rights, there is the concept of cultural relativism. So the World Bank in their letter is citing values. If you read the letter, it says, according to the World Bank's values, what about the values of Uganda and Ugandans? I thought that should have been put into context. But finally, and more importantly on my part, is the aspect of the mandate of the World Bank. World Bank in itself is sounding to be very contradictory. Yes, the loan facilities, the loan programs have had a tremendous effect on what I call socio-economic rights. But with due respect, the World Bank has no mandate over what we would call political rights, and that is in their own documents. Their own documents. That's why people are concerned at the treatment of, gay rights at the expense of other rights. They were very clear themselves in their agreement, very keen to avoid or very slow to enter into internal political processes and rights of the partners. Very clear. And we see this as a demonstration in that line. So we think that World Bank may be having other reasons for suspending loan facilities, but not related to this law. Not related to this law. Because if it was related to this law, they would not be giving the reasons they have given in their communication. Because the reasons they have given in their communication are completely at variance with what the law actually says. So maybe they should come out openly. Be open, be very clear as to why they are suspending loan facilities to Uganda. They should not use the law. They should not use the anti-homosexuality law, because the relationship between their suspension and the law is completely not there. So I thought we would give that context and relate it to the communication that was issued by the World Bank. I'll, in the meantime, leave it at that and hand over to Dr. And the others to make additional comments, if any. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Basalirwa. We now go to, and I'm going to dwell largely on the World Bank. My colleagues will fill in where we haven't done adequately well. Let me start with two obvious statements. First of all, the World Bank itself, it should be known by those who care to know that the World Bank is a tool of the USA and generally Western nations. It's a tool, it's an instrument. World Bank is not a free organization, but it's primarily influenced heavily by the United States of America government and European nations. Number two, for the last 61 years, Uganda has been receiving loans and aid, but in our view, there isn't very much to show for it. And so the excitement and anxiety which many of our citizens have shown, as if to suggest that the world is ending tomorrow because we are not going to be receiving loans, is totally misplaced. And I think on another day we will spend considerable time dissecting what aid and loans mean and what they have actually done to our nation. By and large, in our view, they have been a negative influence on much of our efforts to ensure that we have social and economic transformation. Those are two statements I felt we should start with. Let me also add to what my colleague has just mentioned. Rich nations, the nations that are so mad about this homosexuality, do know very well that nations in the Arab world execute homosexuals. We don't. Our law is not suggesting, proposing, demanding that we execute homosexuals. Much of the Arab world executes homosexuals. Uganda is not proposing to do that. The question really anybody wishing to know would want to ask is, why don't these nations get on with the Arab world the way they are doing with us? Why? And I'll be coming to the answer shortly, but it's important you get to know that much of the Arab world and a few other nations execute, kill, and we're not proposing we should kill homosexuals. Secondly, it should be really be known that there is actually much more to what you have seen, and our discussion is going to look at what it is. What is it that has prompted this tool of the Western nations to come out with threats of suspension of loans? And I've also suggested that, look, we take ourselves back and ask ourselves, for 61 years, we've been receiving aid, loans, and how much is there for us to show for those loans, for those grants, and so on. So the issue now is that we really are of the view that much as they appear incensed at the way we've handled our national affairs, and homosexuality is now the big stick with which they are beating us, there is more to that, and I will be shortly delving into it. Our view is that it's about time nations of Africa reset centuries-old domination and exploitation of Africa in trade, in industry, in investments, in geopolitical relations. There is much more to it than we have been able to understand so far. What is going on is that really aid requires a second look by our nation, and loans, of course, which have been used to blackmail Africa, to blackmail Uganda, so as to do two things. What they have done is to use Uganda to send a message to many other nations, particularly in Africa, that would want to do what we have done. That's really what they are doing. It's not that we have done anything unusual, because remember, there are 26 nations around the world that have criminalized homosexuality. But you don't hear of any one of those nations being talked about the way we are. What is going on are two things. An attempt to send a message to the rest of Africa that if you dare touch these homosexuals, you will be in trouble, the way Uganda is being in trouble. That is number one. That it's being used as a means to warn other nations. And those that are timid will clearly think twice and not do what we, as Uganda, have done. The second one, Remember, the ideology of much of the Western world is exploitation of Africa, domination of Africa, oppression of Africa. That's an ideology that these nations have. Remember, Africa is the source, the primary source of resources they need for their economies. And so it's a serious battle that is going on for the soul of this continent. And anyone who attempts to alter relations which are unequal will be fought to death. So there are two things which are responsible for what we are seeing today. The first one, clearly, is that Uganda is being used to warn other African nations. Number two, what we are attempting to do runs counter to their ideology of oppression, suppression, exploitation, and domination. Anyone who seeks to affect that imbalance will be fought to death. And that's what they are doing now. I'll be explaining shortly more about that, but that is what is going on today. President Museveni has been mobilizing other African leaders to adopt a new mindset that says, look, God gave us resources he did not give to the Western world. But these resources are owned by the Western world. He's now beginning to talk about value addition. And that is resented by much of the Western world. Because value addition will mean these nations can no longer access our resources free of charge. Today, the shame that Africa is suffering from, and I believe God is not really impressed with these Africans. How do I give you resources I have not given the Western world, but these resources are not helping you, they are helping others. He's not happy with us. And any attempt to say, look, Africans, it's about time we benefited from our resources, they will fight him to death. What we are seeing today should be regarded in that direction. That Uganda is being used to warn other African nations that may want to do things that are injurious to interests of the Western world. So really, it's not anything else that we see today, but what is going on is simply an attempt to continue that domination, that exploitation, that oppression, that suppression, and of course, underdevelopment of not only Uganda, but much of the African continent. Western nations, world nations, really want Africa to remain a source of primary raw materials. Simple. Simple. Western world nations want Africa to remain a source of raw materials. Any attempt that seeks to sell those raw materials, we can also benefit by adding value, they will fight you to death. And that's what they are doing now, because of what I'll be explaining shortly is happening today. And so this one-sided exploitative relationship that you see is now inviting that condemnation you see, and Uganda is the scapegoat. It is to our honor that Uganda is setting the pace. Hopefully the rest of Africa will wake up and really do what should be done or should have been done many years ago, but hasn't been done. That it's about time our resources were used to benefit our people, but not to benefit the Western world nations, which don't care a bit about you and I at all. Concerning our attempts to improve our chances, that our people should have employment, our people should have skills, our people should have high standards of living. They don't care a bit about that. What they care about is a situation that allows them to continue taking away our resources in exchange for peanuts in form of loans, in form of aid, as you know. President Museveni is now attempting to stop export of raw minerals like gold, iron ore, uranium, oil, petroleum, etc. You've heard him making statements from time to time saying it's about time we benefited from these resources God has given us. He is singularly, I've not had any other African leader using the language President Museveni is using, advocating that Africa should stop exporting raw materials, raw minerals, unprocessed agricultural produce such as you know very well, milk and coffee. He's saying, look, we can add value to this. And of course, if Africa adds value, that means the benefits that the Western world were getting are going to be interfered with. And so they are fighting back, using all means, intimidation. Sadly, our own officials, some of them, are willing to sell their country, but it's now clear the fight is on because the Western world is very, very unhappy about what is going on. Now, the West, of course, is being assisted by some of our own officials. Sadly, some of our own officials who benefit God knows how much are the ones who are their collaborators in this regard. And as I said, the machinery that is being used to continue this perpetuation of domination, exploitation, oppression, suppression, that ideology. Anyone who says we are going to negotiate with these people, you are wasting your time. You're not serious. Because they know that it's that dominance that allows them to benefit from our resources. And you can't discuss with somebody whose primary intention is to continue exploiting from you. What we would wish to see is Africa uniting and strengthening their resistance and in order to demand for a just world. And we have a reason for this, really, that Africa needs herself more than she needs development partners. We've got it wrong from the beginning, and now our officials, some of them, have made it a habit. You see, even in our budgets, you budget for loans from outside, aid from outside. You are budgeting resources which are not there, which are not yours, but it's that mentality that you cannot do without loans, without aid from outside, that some of our officials are not able to help us get out of this mess. Africa needs herself more than she needs development partners. I can explain that 1/2 of the entire African continent, from North Africa to Southern Africa, has the highest value and most rare minerals, oil and gas that propel the defense, aircraft industries, and economies of much of the Western world. Much of the Western world's economies largely depend on resources that only Africa has got. The other issue is that the second half of the African nations are leading organic food granary of the world. Much of Africa is the leading organic food granary of the world. And so you can see that the rest of the world very much depends on Africa. Any attempt to change that, and that is the context, members of the press, that what you see is simply because Uganda is attempting to change the imbalance that has existed over the years, that they are now coming out brazenly to fight us, and they are also, of course, feeding on the timidity of some of our people, the corruption of some of our officials, in order to continue this perpetuation. What can we do as a continent? So what we can do as a continent, and many have been proposing all this, there are many areas. First of all, we should thank God that we are being threatened by these nations. It's about time we wake up. They are going to help us to wake up and say, wait a minute, we can do without these friends. We can do without these friends who take much of what we own and give us little in return. And so it's a great moment for Uganda that we are being threatened. It's a great moment for Africa to realize that we've got to wake up and avoid this embarrassment and shame that has cost us resources over the years. So there are many areas of duplication, bloated administration costs, wasteful expenditure, pervasive corruption, which is going on. And what we need to do is to prioritize our resources, impose in this discipline, frugality, and avoid wastage, because there's so much wastage, wasteful expenditure that we see, and need for strict accountability. We need to emphasize this. We need to ensure that there is effective implementation and supervision of plans and projects. We need to downsize bureaucracy. This is a hugely important matter. Motivate our public service. Give teeth to institutions such as IGG, and also really impose punitive action on those individuals who continue to steal resources of this nation, which ultimately makes us reliable to further exploitation, domination, and so on and so forth. So these are measures government can take. We are trusting that government will compose itself and really see what we can. We can win this battle. It's a big one because it is involving nations whose ideology is oppression and exploitation, and other nations that have been on the receiving end over the years. And Uganda is one of them. We would like to encourage the president, our president, to mobilize his friends so that Africa can move together and be treated equally with other nations around the world. Honorable Sarah.
I want to request the World Bank to stick to its core mandate, which is providing long-term economic development and eradicating or reducing poverty from countries. The World Bank did not create human beings. God created human beings, and He created a man and a woman, and gave us clear commandments, and we are living by those commandments. We are not going to relent to accept sin being disguised as a human right. The law that we passed is intended to ensure that sin does not find its way in this country. The law that we passed, the Anti-Homosexuality Act, is intended to protect the children of this country. We are not going to allow the sexualization of our children, sodomizing children and calling that a human right. We appreciate the support that has been extended by the World Bank. Through this support, we have constructed some schools. Not all schools were constructed by the World Bank. Through the support from the World Bank, we have constructed some health centers. We've constructed some roads. And the discrimination that the World Bank is talking about remains a question in my mind. Children are going to school. The roads are being used by all Ugandans. The health facilities, health services are being provided to all Ugandans. So what discrimination are we talking about? I want to tell the World Bank, those few Ugandans out there that are trying to confuse the World Bank and other development partners are self-seekers. They're actually looking for greener pastures. And given an opportunity, once they have achieved what they want, they will revert and become normal human beings. So the World Bank, I want to request you, stick to your core mandate, and please respect Uganda, because it's a sovereign nation with its own values, and this is all that we are promoting. Thank you.
All right,
I am also happy that I'm joining a team
add a voice onto other many voices that are reactive, as in what came out as intimidation from World Bank. For me, I'm calling it intimidation. Probably, before I hit the name, my name is Chiza Robert Moses, MP Buendera. I have been a member of Legal and Parliamentary Committee. Currently, I am on physical infrastructure. In fact, we are the people. When Honorable Ashman Vasari wrote this bill, we are the people who discussed it exhaustively. We consulted everyone. You know World Bank, and I know they are listening. World Bank are the authors of democracy. And whatever we do is supposed to be democratically done. So when the bill was brought, all stakeholders, including those ones they call that have been discriminated against, because on the committee we had Honorable Fox Odor. He stood alone, even on the floor. To the last point when he conceded, we invited very many people who were anti. Now I wonder when World Bank comes in to say that the bill, which is now a law that is discriminatory, I don't get the point, I miss it. I think this is political witch hunt. This is how we perceive it. We have a great leader, His Excellency the President, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is a great leader. But it's not about, it's nowhere I'm seeing him getting intimidated at all, because the whole country, all members of parliament, we consulted the voters. And when we passed this law, everyone was on screen seeing who is objecting. The only member who objected, in fact there were two, but one considered and said, I'm no longer objecting. The man one, when he went back home, the story was really not okay on his side. And you say discriminatory law? This country, we have estates. I am happy that this fourth estate is also behind the move. The media, the executive, judiciary, legislature, we are all in unison in regard to this. And you talk of the law intimidated because Uganda is a member of World Bank, and you are aware that in any organization, when you are a member, there is a way, when a resolution is made, the resolution has to be agreed upon by consensus. But when you look at the resolution, when you look at the letter from World Bank, it is as if they are individuals which hunting Uganda in a way to intimidate other countries that are also in transit to resolve the same. This is what I am seeing. So if World Bank is democratic, I believe that member countries would have been brought on board. A resolution is made involving all member states. But you see, members, superpowers, this is really not okay. It has not augured well to us as legislators, and we are not
about to surrender about it, and I don't think we can make a U-turn on it. I submit.
Thank you.
All right.
Fabusa. I represent the people of Bamba County in the Bundubujo district at the extreme border with DR Congo. First of all, I don't regret supporting this law because the people I represent said I should come and say no to homosexuality. Colleagues, the Honorable Basaldo has given a brief about the law. I don't want to repeat that. But I just want to clarify something that Ugandans need to know. From the communication by World Bank, people seem to begin thinking that beginning this year, we are not getting any loans or any financial support from World Bank. That's not true. The communication from the World Bank is to the effect that there will not be any new loan requests from the World Bank. But those that had already been approved, those that were already in the pipeline, will come. That money will come. And the last I checked was that by December 2022, the World Bank had earmarked $5.4 billion US for disbursement to Uganda. And this money does not go in anybody's pocket. Doesn't go in the pocket of the president. This money doesn't go in the pocket of the members of parliament. No. This money goes to support economic development for Ugandans in the areas of infrastructure development, in the areas of healthcare service delivery, in the areas of education, and all other social, economic, and political development areas. So, for me, whether it is intimidation by the World Bank, like colleagues have said, whether it is blackmail, for me, I have only one question for World Bank. World Bank knows why we borrow money from them as a country. This money, as I've said, is to support healthcare. Healthcare for all Ugandans, including the people they are purporting to fight for, the homosexuals. This money supports infrastructure development for all Ugandans, including the people they purport to fight for. The question I'm asking, and I need an answer from World Bank. Colleagues have talked about values. Yes, you have your values as World Bank, but we also have values as Ugandans. So in this relationship, it is important that we respect each other's values. I need an answer from World Bank. So by withholding this funding, by withholding this lending to Uganda, and well knowing that this money goes to support socio-economic development of the entire country, including the queer people that you purport to fight for. So who are you punishing? Who are you punishing? Are you punishing the president? Are you punishing the members of parliament? Are you not now exacerbating poverty, pushing back these people whose human rights you purport to fight for? Because if you stop funding, Then we are going to have challenges, for example, with healthcare service provision for HIV. You well know there is already proof scientifically, and one of the reasons we said no to homosexuality is that the majority of the people involved in these acts, actually the HIV prevalence rate is 4 times higher than normal. So where will these people get these services? Because there will not be funding for those services. If you are supporting smallholder farmers, this is where the World Bank money is coming to support. And then we don't have this financial support. Then the smallholder farmers, including the same people you purport to support, will be pushed back into poverty. The question I'm asking the World Bank, and I need an answer as a legislator, as a people's representative, who are we targeting when we are imposing these sanctions to Uganda? Who are we targeting? Who is going to suffer? It can't be the president. It can't be the members of parliament. It can't be cabinet. It is the local person who is at the same time targeted by the support, by the borrowing that the government gets from World Bank. Because this money, like I said, does not go to anybody's pockets at the national level in terms of the leaders of this country. This money is targeted to support social service delivery, infrastructure development, education, health, agriculture, for all Ugandans, including the people that we purport to fight for. So for me, my appeal, in addition to what my colleagues have said, first of all, understand the law that we passed, and we are not about to repeal it. First of all, it has not even been implemented fully. We have to wait until it is implemented. If we find there is any negative impact in its implementation, we are here. But we are not about to repeal it. But let's go back, World Bank, go back and sit and look at the decision you are making, if it is going to affect the same people that we are fighting for their rights. There are so many criminal laws in this country. We criminalize, for example, theft. Why has World Bank not come to say, no, you are discriminating against thieves? Because they are also human beings. We criminalize rapists. We criminalize defilement. Why has World Bank not come to say, no, you are discriminating against the defilers? Why are we at this time specifically fighting for one set of criminals that we are saying homosexuality is a criminal act in Uganda? If it is not elsewhere, well and good. Like our president has always said, there are things you do there, and we just look on because you are doing them in your country. But here we are saying this is wrong. And we are saying, by the way, even if you say you are a homosexual by birth, we are not saying we should criminalize you. But what we are criminalizing is you promoting that act of homosexuality. So, what's the problem? Until I get that answer of that question I have asked the World Bank, who are they targeting? I will not rest. Thank you very much.
This is the beginning. The suspension is on, and I know, if I'm not wrong, European Union also will follow, and then other small European states that this government gets aid from. But again, we cannot let our values go. We have to protect our values as Ugandans, because if we don't protect our values, next time they will ask us to start mounting cows, goats, and all those kind of things, which is not good. If we are hit hard, we shall definitely support government in reducing on the number of cabinets, the number of members of parliament, the number of presidential advisors, and all these wasteful expenditures that government is undertaking. And that one I call upon everyone to rally behind us if we are hit hard. So we shall protect our values as Africans. We are not going to relent to homosexuality. We shall ensure that our families, our children are protected by the law that we put in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whenever you start coming,
maybe Asman. Eh? Okay, kati. Okay, neyanziza zengenda omanyi communication abantu bangi betu communicatingira bangi kati olusi tubeera ne level ya society gye tucommunicatingira mu message. N'olwekyo nze ngenda kwogera ku groups endala. Tulina groups ab'abantu baffe ng'abavuzi ba taxi n'abantu baffe ab'ekisenyi ate nga baba bantegeera bulungi. So sigenda baliiramu nnyo naye njagala bakakasa nti bano bamangere oba abazungu bo baba baagala tutandika okuvuga maramu. Ne bino bye batugamba nga World Bank amateeka ge baagala tuteerako bo bagamba nti tukirize tulye maramu ndeni batuwe majja ate ebintu ng'ebyo tetukola ki ffe nga bannayuganda tetujja bikiriza. So nkubiriza bannayuganda ffenna ensonga zino ez'okuvuga maramu because olulala bajja gamba tutandike okulinyirira mbuzi, ente, pusi n'ebintu ng'ebyo ate nga ffe value zaffe oba ennono yaffe nga bannayuganda tulina ogikuuma bulungi. So sigenda baliiramu nnyo, sigenda batabbira nnyo vere naye byange ebyebyo. Thank you.
Ekya World Bank otuteekako bye tutasobola okukola nga bannayuganda mukimanyi lino etteeka lye twakola ery'ebyobusiyazi buli munnayuganda yali alyagala era baatusapootinga. Ebitundu byonna ebya Uganda bye tuvaamu baatugamba bino ebyobusiyazi tetubyagala era ne tugenda mu maaso ne tukola etteeka. Kati bano abazungu aba World Bank bagamba tebagenda kuddamu tuwa ssente za kukola ebintu bye tubadde twagala naye ffe tuli bagumu. Ekiba kyetaaga kunyigiriza ensaasaganya y'essente tugenda kikola nga palamenti nga gavumenti naye tubeerewo bye tumanyi nti bituufu bye tukola. Omuntu tasobola kugamba nti kati genda weebake na mwannyoko ndyoke nkuwe ssente naawe n'okkiriza nti akuba nti oyagala ssente. Tosobola kikola. Kati bino twabiganye ebyobusiyazi twabiganye nga bannayuganda nga Baafrika. Kati abazungu tebagenda tusindikiriza nti lwakuba batuwa ssente kati tugende tukole bye tutaagala ate nze ndaba bino tetugenda bisobola. Tetugenda tubiganye.
Njagala kusaba World Bank omulimo gwame mukulu okulaba nti muwola eggwanga ezeetaaga ssente z'okulaba nti zikulakulana n'okuva mu bwavu. Mulekerawo okuyingira mu bintu eby'amawanga ate amawanga gano gakkiririzamu Katonda ye yatonda. World Bank teyatonda bantu, Katonda ye yatonda bantu. N'atonda omwami n'atonda n'omukyala. Era tutambulira ku komandi katonda gye yatulekera gye yateekawo. So tetugenda kuva ku mulamwa kubanga ng'eggwanga tukkiririza nnyo mu madiini. So ebisyaga tekikkirizibwa. It is a sin. Omenya amateeka ga Katonda. So World Bank tetugenda kumenya amateeka ga Katonda eyatutonda kubanga twagala ssente za World Bank. Twagala kubeebaza. Mutuwadde ssente tuzimbye enguudo naye si zonna kubanga ne government erina ssente z'esoloza ku muwimu w'omusolo. Tuzimbye amalwaliro si gonna, endala ssente tuzigye awalala. Era Abannayuganda bafuna obujjanjabi, Abannayuganda batambula mu nguudo zino, Abannayuganda bagenda mu masomero agamu World Bank yazimba. Sinalabako ku muntu gwe bagamba nti togendayo kubanga oli musyazi, kubanga abasyazi tetumanyi wawe bali. Abo abatono abali eyo ebweru abalimba World Bank n'ensi endala nti bajjeewo obuyambi mu ggwanga lino, njagala bategeeza World Bank nti abo abantu banoonya muwogo, banoonya okukyusa embeera yaabwe naye si kubanga bakkiririza mu bisyaga. So mbasaba nga World Bank musigale ku leeni yammwe, mutuleke etteeka gye twaleeta yakulaba nti abaana baffe bakula nga bakkiririza mu kwebyo command Katonda gye yateeka. Twagala kulaba nti families zaffe zisigala nga families zaffe ze tumanyi Katonda ze yateekawo. So etteeka lyaffe mutuleke.
Nti ekikolebwa banka ensi yonna kirungi nnyo kubanga kituwadde omukisa gw'okutegeera nti twakamala emyaka 61 nga tufuna ssente ebweru naye essente ezo zituleetedde obuzibu. Abantu baffe bamu nga bazibba, bazikozesa mu ngeri etali nnungi. Awo ate nga tusasula ssente zino si kugamba ngu zibadde za bwereere. Ekyo kikulu kutegeera nti ssente ze batuwa si za bwereere. Kale nno awo kijja kuyamba ffenna ng'Abanyayuganda okutuula ne tulowooza ku ngeri ki gye tunaasobola okugenda mu maaso nga tukolera abantu baffe. Amazima gali nti amawanga g'ebweru ge gakontrolinga World Bank yemuwulira. World Bank eno si kitongole ekikola ebitakkirizibwa ago mawanga manene, tesobola. Bwegambe byekoze byagambibwa Amerika, Bungereza n'amawanga malala. Ekikulu kye tusaanide kutegeera tebatufaako. Bw'olaba nti batufaako ensonga eri nti ebintu byaffe bye bakozesa bye bibaleetera okutuwa obuyambi ate nga si bunene. Ekyo mukitegeere nga tusabe gavumenti yaffe naffe ffenna tutuule wamu kulaba nti obugaga obwatuweebwa Katonda tubukozesa mu ngeri nnungi ejja kuleetera abantu baffe okugenda mu maaso. Batujooga. Ekintu ekyo kikulu. Abaddugavu tuli mu buzibu bunene kubanga bagamba nti abantu bano ensi Katonda yabawa ebintu byonna bye tutalina naye ffe tubikozesa ne tubawo buntu butonotono bwe butyo naye tebategeera kye baliko kwe kulwanagana ebyo bye tubeeramu bulijjo. Tutegeera nti omubbi gwali ayagala ebintu byaffe ku bwereere. Ekintu ekyo ndi musanyufu kubanga kirabika eggwanga olwaleero ligenda kulowooza ku kintu kino baleke okutujooga kubanga kiri bwe kityo. Nga ndi musanyufu ate ndowooza ndina Katonda abadde musanyufu kulaba nti obugagga bwaffe ababukozesa si ffe, bukozesebwa abantu ababeeru. Nga nsaba Abanyayuganda mwenna mube bakakamu, tulwanise obubbi, kubanga ekyo kintu kituleetedde ensonga nene kulaba nti tetulina amaanyi ng'eggwanga. Ababbi bangi batukola bubi. Tusabe Katonda tuwe amagezi okulwanisa abantu bano kubanga batukoze bubi nnyo. Ekisembayo nandisabye gavumenti yaffe n'amawanga gaba Africa tukole kye bayita sanctions ku mawanga gano gagatwepankako. Ebintu bugagga bwaffe naye batwepankako. Nandisabye Africa yonna ekole sanctions ku mawanga gano gatutawaanya, awo tulabe ensi yaffe bwe naagenda mu maaso. Mwebale.
Uganda ya mukisa era njagala okwebaza Katonda nti ke kaseera World Bank ekomye okutuwa ssente kubanga akugoba yakuwa ekkubo. Tetugenda kwekkiriranya kutta values zaffe ez'obwakatonda nti twagala ensimbi. Bayibuli egamba nti eggwanga erina Katonda waalyo nga ye Mukama lya mukisa. Tetusobola kutta principles zaffe, tetusobola kutta nono zaffe olw'ensonga nti twagala ssente ezigenda okukola emirimu ate zibbibwa bubbibwa. Democracy kinene. Ensi yaffe twavaayo ng'ababaka ng'Abannayuganda ne bagamba nti obufumbo bw'ebikukujju ebisyaga bibi si bya Bwakatonda era ne tukola etteeka ng'ensi esazeewo. World Bank okuvaayo n'egamba nti egenda kutuggyako obuyambi, oba oluusi gwe mukisa gugenda okutuyamba okukula. Ate kino kyakulabirako mu Africa, omutima gwe tugamba nti Pan-Africanism gende mu maaso nga wano Uganda tukikoze n'abalala bataaveeyo kulwanyisa kintu kino kigenda bakuba. Awo nno njagala okutegeeza World Bank nti World Bank kyekoze kikyamu naye ate kitwadde omukisa nti kooti y'ensi yonna yavaayo n'erambulula n'egamba nti obufumbo bw'ebikukujju si ddembe lya buntu. Bajjaaji 47 baavaayo ne balamula ne bagamba nti obufumbo bw'ebikukujju si ddembe lya buntu, era ne bavaayo ne bagamba nti ensi eyeetongodde ya ddembe okukola etteeka erigenda okuluŋŋamya ennono zaalyo. Kakati ezo ssente mulekeeyo. Tulina ssente ezimala okuddukanya bajeti yaffe. Singa obubbi, singa mwami Museveni manyi nti ondaba, singa ovaayo n'ogamba nti ekimala kimala n'okwata ababbi abo ate abasinga batambula naawe awo n'obakwata bwoti, nkiriza gaana nti tugenda kusobola okweyimirizaawo bajeti yaffe, kubanga development budget wetwogerera ya trillion 15 ezisinga zigenda mu babanja zigenda kubbibwa. Trillion 10 zigenda mu kubbibwa. Tax exemptions zetugaba trillion 10 namba, singa tunakendeeza ensaasaanye ne parliament okugikendeezaako tuliirere ku commission eyagala kwongeza. No, wasteful expenditure singa tunagikomya kakasa tusobola okugenda mu maaso ng'eggwanga oba ne twetongola. World Bank ambeebaza bwebazi nti mwebale nakisikomaawo. Uganda is a sovereign state and we have a democracy. We are a democracy. Therefore, we cannot compromise our Christian values. We cannot compromise our morals because of money. Perhaps this is a time that God has given us to begin depending on ourselves. I would like to appreciate World Bank for what it has done, because if we dealt well with our budget, we have a lot of wasteful expenditure. If only the President Museveni could come out clearly and address the issue of corruption, fight corruption to the dot, we can be able to stand by our own. World Bank, World Court came out and said that homosexuality, same-sex marriage is not a human right. And these were about 47 judges. They came out with that. And therefore, we can depend on ourselves without your funds, and perhaps it's time for us to grow into a great nation because we can depend on ourselves. Thank you.
Ndi musanyufu nti mwababadde balowooza nti kino ekintu kyabasalirwa ndowooza mulabidde ddala nti si kyangu. Ekyokubiri abadde balowooza mbu ababaka bali eyo olwa visa naki tebajja kuvaayo mu kamera, ndowooza mukakasizza. Era ndi musanyufu nnyo nti amaloboozi gatandise okuwulikana okusuuka ku basaalirwa. Kati buli omu avaayo ayogera. N'olwekyo bwe baba bakola visa bans bagenda bongereko, kuba kakati sofa tuli basatu officially, kati bagenda baba bongerako olw'okuba amaloboozi gatandise okuwulikana. Kanjogereyo ensonga 3 okusookera ddala. Tugenda kukosebwa oba nedda? Mu short term, World Bank oba banka y'ensi yonna okusalawo okusalako okutuwola essente kijja kutukosa mu short term ne mu medium term. Tujja kukosebwa olw'okuba enteekateeka yaffe oba ebyenfuna byaffe budget tubadde tubikola nga tusuubira oba nga tutunuulidde ssente zisobola okuva mu World Bank. So kijja tukosaamu, era saagala nnyo ekyo tuleme kukikkiriza. Naye ate mu longo term tujja kutebenkera, kuba n'olw'okuba teri nsi ewangaalira ku mabanja obulamu bwayo bwonna. World Bank yatandikawo mwaka gwa 1944 naye nga tenabeerawo Uganda yaliwo. Kiba kitegeeza nti bwebanga Uganda yaliwoko nga World Bank teriiwo, World Bank bw'enaagenda era tujja kusigalawo. So okukosebwa kujja kubeerawo mu short term ne mu medium term, naye mu maaso eyo mu longo term tujja kutebenkera, kuba tewali nsi etondebwawo ku mabanja newangalira ku mabanja. Ekyo kyekisooka. Ekyokubiri, twayogera wano ku bantu abalala abali abeeteefuteefu okutuwa essente, era ndi musanyufu nti waliwo enteekateeka ezigenda mu maaso okunoonya emikwano emirala n'abagaba essente abalala, era enteekateeka eyo ejja kwanjulwa mu paalamenti. Ekyokusatu, World Bank ebbaluwa gye yawadde ng'esalawo okusazaamu essente zeetuwola yabadde erimu ebintu 3 ebitakwatagana. Okusookera ddala, yagambye mbu etteeka paalamenti lye yayisa liteeka omusango ku buli munnayuganda bw'aba taloopye bikolwa bya busiyazi. Ekyo si kituufu. Era olabira ddala nga waliwo obutali bwerufu, waliwo obulimba, waliwo obukuusa ku sayidi ya World Bank. Temuli kawaayiro konna mu tteeka lino akagamba nti munnayuganda bw'aba taloopye bikolwa bya bisiyaga aba azizza omusango. Tekalimu. N'ate bw'otunulira ebbaluwa ya World Bank ekyo ekyogerako. Akawaayiro akalimu kagamba nti ebikolwa eby'ekisiyazi bwe biba bikoleddwa ku mwana omuto oba omuntu yenna ateesobola, ayinza okuba mulema, aliko obulemu, muzibe, aliko obuzibu ku mutwe, anoonya bubudamu, tategeera bigenda mu maaso, etteeka lyeyita vulnerable persons, oyo bw'obanga ekikolwa kimukoleddwako n'okiraba n'otaloopa oba ozizza omusango. Awatali ekyo tewali musango gwonna muntu gwabazizza ng'alabye omuntu yenna atali mu kategori eyo ng'ali mu bisiyaga n'atalopa, tewali musango. Ekyokubiri, World Bank yagambye nti lino etteeka ligenda kutataaganya ebyobulamu by'eggwanga. Ekyo nakyo kifu kikyamu. Tewali wano mu Uganda musawo yenna akkirizibwa kubuuza muntu kikula kye, keba eggwanga lye oba ddiini lye, ng'akikola ng'ekimu ku bintu ebikolebwa alyoka afuna obujjanjabi. Ne World Bank eyagala kuteekawo mu bbaluwa yaayo eringa egamba nti mu Uganda bw'ogenda mu ddwaliro okufuna obujjanjabi basooka kubuuza kikulwa kyo eky'obuntu ekitali kituufu. Amateeka gonna agafuga abasawo n'obusawo galambika bulungi nti omusawo omuntu yenna abaze gy'oli olina buvunaanyizibwa kumujjanjaba. Wano mu Uganda omuntu ne bw'abeera mubbi ne bamukuba amasasi, ng'amasasi bagamukuba nga bamukwatidde mu bubbi, bw'atwalibwa mu ddwaliro omusawo tabuuza baamukubidde ki era baamukubiddewa. Ekyo si kikye. Omusawo asooka kumujjanjaba ate ab'ebitongole ebirala bwe batandikira. So n'olwekyo twagala World Bank erowoozesa abantu nti wano mu Uganda basooka kubuuza kikula kyo olyoka ofune obujjanjabi. Nalabe n'aba Ministry of Health nabo nga bafulumya ekiwandiiko nga bagezaako okwennyonnyolako. Ministry of Health temwetaagwa kunnyonnyola. Ekyo tekyetaaga kunnyonnyola. Sitwagala tubeere ku pressure oba ku tension oba tubeere defensive. Tekiriiyo. Bwe wabeerawo eyo Munnayuganda nga musiyazi nga yagenda okufuna obujjanjabi ne basooka kumubuuza oba musiyazi oba nedda, bw'abanga gy'ali eyo njagala aveeyo naye tumuyambe, kuba omusawo yenna ekyo aba akikola aba amenya mateeka. So ekyo nakyo mu bbaluwa ya World Bank nakirabyemu naye nga kirimu obutali bwerufu. Ekyokusatu, World Bank mu kusalawo okusazaamu pulogulaamu y'okutuwa ensimbi yagambye nti yasinzidde ku nnono yaabwe nga World Bank. Bakozesa ekigambo values. Ennono za World Bank tezikkaanya nti ennono za World Bank tezikkaanya nateeka lisosola bantu bakikula ekyo. Eyo statement yabadde nnungi nnyo. Naye twagala kubuuza aba World Bank, mwogedde ku nnono zammwe nga World Bank, kirungi nnyo. Zo ennono z'Abannayuganda zo muzireseewa. Mwe mwagala kwerowoozaako mwe mweka, abalala be mukolagana nabo temubalowoozaako. Era ddi ennono za World Bank bwe zaafuuka ennono z'ensi yonna, nti World Bank bw'eba esazeewo ensi yonna tuteekwa kugoberera. Awo wateekeddwa okubeerawo okwewa ekitiibwa mu nteekateeka eyo. Ensonga esembayo, World Bank yagambye nti lino etteeka lisosola. Okusosola, bakozesa ekigambo okusosola. Ssemateeka yaffe eya Uganda akawaayiro 21 Article 21 ennyonnyola bulungi Munnayuganda tasosolebwa mu ngeri ki, ne boogera ku ggwanga lye, ddiini lye, ekikula kye oba mwami oba mukyala n'ebirala ebifaanagana bwe bityo. Obusiyazi mu ssemateeka y'eggwanga si byebimu ku bintu by'ovunaana eggwanga nti oyo baamusosodde olw'obusiyazi, kuba abaakola ssemateeka baalambika bulungi nsonga ki ze tusobola okugamba nti ono asobola oba oyinza okugamba nti omusosodde. Ssemateeka yakiggala, gwe tosobola kuva eri n'oteekamu kintu kirala. Ate katugambe nti okusiyaga ddembe lya buntu, katukyogere bwe tutyo. Kirimu obwo obuwaayiro mu ssemateeka y'eggwanga obutasobola kugibwawo, kuba akawaayiro 44 aka Constitution Article 44 koogera ku nsonga 4 zokka zotasobola kujjawo mu mbeera yonna: habeas corpus, freedom from torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, babyogera. olaba n'obulamu obusinga okubeera obwa waggulu nabwo busobola okutwalibwa ng'oyise mu ssemateeka ate bisiya. So n'olwekyo tulowooza nti World Bank yandibadde ensonga eyo egitunulamu. Ensonga esembayo, World Bank yennyini mu mateeka agagivuga egamba nti tekkirizibwa kweyingiza mu nsonga za ggwanga. Yennyini mu bitabo mu agreement oba mu nteekateeka eteekawo World Bank tebeeyingiza mu nsonga za munda ez'ensi. Naye wano tulaba World Bank ate eva ku biwandiiko byayo byennyini bye yateekawo. Kuba kiba kitegeeza nti Uganda okuyisa amateeka kaka tugenda kusooka nga kwebuuza ku World Bank. Abaayiri neteeka linaabasanyusa tuliyise oba lijja banyiza tulireke. Naye kakati eyo level ndowooza nti tetusobola gituukako era tetujja gituukako. Twagala kusaba busabi nti World Bank eteekeddwa okuba nga yabadde n'ensonga ndala ez'okutusalako ensimbi naye nga si tteeka. Kuba singa kyabadde lya tteeka, singa ensonga ze bawa zikwatagana n'etteeka naye ensonga ze bawa tezifaanagana na tteeka. Ekyokubiri, singa kituufu nti World Bank yasazeeko obuyambi ng'esinziira mu tteeka, yandibadde tetunuulira ffeffeka nga Uganda, yandibadde etunuulira n'ensi endala. Ate nga mwana wattu waliwo ensi endala eziyina amateeka amakambwe ennyo okusingako n'eryaffe. Ghana yo ate yayise nawo, kuba Ghana yeyina akawaayiro akagamba nti okubeera omusiyazi gwo musango, okubeera omusiyazi. Naye mu Uganda tugamba nti osobola okubeera naye bwe tuba tetukukutte mu kikolwa toyina musango. Yo Ghana bagambye n'okugamba nti okubeera obubeezi existence, bino byogamba nti nze banzaala ndi musiyazi, Ghana guba musango mu tteeka gye baleeta. So n'olwekyo nandirowoozezza nti ensonga ezo twandibadde tuzitunulamu bwe tutyo. Ndowooza